Bretonnia is no doubt very awesome and certainly much improved in the cavalry beta, but it still does suffer as a faction from one glaring weakness, and that is predictability. Yes, as the heavy cavalry faction, you can pretty much guarantee that anti-large armor piercing, especially armored infantry like halberds and great weapons, are going to be good against them. As a result, they do suffer from a few bad matchups. Warriors of Chaos is certainly one of them. This is from Norman, who is playing as Warriors of Chaos here. He's got the anti-Fey double paladin with Archaon double exalted hero. And the counterparts over on the other side, some marauders and marauder great weapons through the center, halberds and Chaos Warriors with great weapons out of the flanks, some poison warhounds and throwing axes. On Bretonnia's side, we've got Knights of the Realm and some Grail Knights as well. Two Questing Knights on this side, 5 archers, some men-at-arms, spears, and shields, and then the meat shield mobs up front. And, I mean, one reason why Bretonnia's still so strong in the current meta is because the Fey is so ridiculously strong, but they do very much rely on her as a crutch. Without her, they would be significantly worse. Just the lack of tools for combating armored infantry is pretty real. Questing Knights are obviously one of them, but against like halberds and dedicated great weapons, they're still not going to trade amazing oftentimes. And just as a result, you know, a lot of factions can do a lot of things against Bretonnia. Certainly here in the center, though, Bowfire breaks some of those great weapons. Norman's going to unleash a nice burning head here to roast out one of the 2 spearmen-at-arms with shields there and some of the mobs as well. Archaon getting in a little bit of trouble versus the double paladins, but his exalted heroes coming in to help as the warriors break those mobs. So that's going to be a rough 2v3 for the paladins, especially because Archaon is mixed in there. Questing Knights also moving in. We've got warriors with great weapons, warriors with halberds also supporting that engagement. Meanwhile, over on the other side here, Knights of the Realm, Grail Knights, trying their best to cycle charge, but even in the cavalry beta, Chaos Warriors with great weapons are one of the best great weapon units. They've always been one of the best great weapon infantry in the game, if not the best for the cost. Just so cost effective, trade great with a multitude of different units. And so even without halberds, I mean, you can still trade well. And there are also halberds mixed in here, right? Grail Knights definitely overstaying their welcome there, but still, they're not going to do as much damage on the charge, right, because of the armor. And yeah, I mean, those excellent mid-tier armored infantry are one of the reasons Warriors of Chaos are so good right now. It's because that's just a great unit type in the current meta. And obviously Bretonnia does struggle, but as long as the Fae is still alive, she can drain out everything that's left. So obviously most Bretonnian builds rely on combating those infantry with that drain, just keeping the enchantress locked in with the paladins. Right now the paladins are still alive. Definitely took a beating at the hands of Archaon and his exalted bros. They are pushing forward relentlessly with these Chaos Warriors. Kind of interesting, like, looking at the great weapons right next to the halberds. Halberds are definitely noticeably longer, but they also still kind of just look like big old axes. Fun stuff. Anyway, more mobs are going to rush back in here, try and support. A little bit of Shield of Thorns as well. You can see Archaon is running away. Obviously, 1v3 is not going to be good at all for him, so he tactically withdraws from the Fae and the 2 paladins. Paladins are going to get caught up by a really cheeky, nice doggo charge here. And the Fae probably wants to just dive straight in, not necessarily fight Archaon herself. Even like 3v3, though, this is going to be a fight in advantage of Archaon, despite the magic resistance. I mean, just the fact he does so much damage. And the Exalted Heroes with their physical damage can certainly do enough to punish the Enchantress here, given they have great weapon strength for the cost. And in comparison to Paladins, I think even after Paladins bonus versus large, the Exalted Heroes probably still have better weapon strength, better armor? No, that's right. I forgot the Barded Steed. Somebody corrected me on that last time, but not really going to matter that much. Archaon's magic damage doesn't mean much against the Paladins, since they don't have any kind of magic resistance. If anything, just cutting straight through the Guardian there. And that will be the end for those two. Without their protection, without any supporting infantry, the Fae can't really stand and grind. And not to mention, she's going to get eaten up by this goon squad here. So, unfortunately, just not enough time for the Enchantress to do her work. And you can see all these halberd and great weapon infantry. I say all. The halberd infantry are basically completely healthy. So the great weapon infantry definitely took a beating. You can see a little bit of the difference there. But Yeah, I mean, foot squires you might think would be the answer, and we'll talk a little bit about foot squires after the fact. I have some testing videos to show you, but mainly the reason why this is such an issue as it currently is, well, the reason why I would hesitate to advocate for any nerfs for the Fey Enchantress is because of this, right? Like, it's really the only way for Bretonnia to combat those armored-type infantry. Like, hippogriffs are also large armored units. They're very expensive and somewhat squishy. Like, questing knights with aggressive cycle charge can do it, and if you heal them, but again, they're going to take significant losses, and they're still a cavalry-type unit. Foot squires are just terrible. They're one of the worst infantry units in the game for the cost, and so you just shouldn't use them, really, most of the time. They'll trade badly against most units. Like, it's just, they just don't trade well against most units in the game. Even like chaff infantry, they don't really trade cost effectively against. Enchantress gets routed there, and it's going to be victory for Norman. And not taking anything away from his victory, he definitely, you know, played it very well, keeping Archaon and the Goon Squad kind of in favorable engagements against the Fey and the Paladin, which is #1 priority in anyone, you know, for anyone fighting Bretonnia, is to manage the two Paladins and the Fey Enchantress, and he did that exactly perfectly. The rest of the build was able to clean up there. So pretty impressive kill totals on the Marauders for the Knights of the Realm. They did decently, but still don't pay for themselves. In fact, none of this cavalry pays for itself, especially the Grail Knights. That's just kind of symptom of fighting the Warriors of Chaos. Pox Arrows do okay, trade actually pretty good value. Peasant Archers are some of the best units for Bretonnia in general, but one mob, 174 kills. Sorry, 174 damage value, 4 kills. Impressive stuff. Yeah, Spearmen at Arms don't really do much for you here. They just kind of get run over. And that's the thing, is like, you know, if you had better defensive units, maybe you could just use the Fey Enchantress in a full 20 stack of defensive infantry. But unfortunately, your defensive infantry are pretty low tier, and they are not going to really hold against a sustained assault. So end up just getting terror routed or broken, you know, standard way. Just not. You don't have any time for the Fey Enchantress to get her drain effect going, which is more or less what happened here. Archaon, over 2,000 damage value, very good stuff. The Exalted Hero is also contributing well. All the Chaos Warriors are going to get good value here also. I mean, one Halberd really didn't do a lot, but they didn't really have to do a lot. The other three all paid for themselves quite well. Marauders kind of get eaten up here, but that's okay. Nice job by the Hounds as well. Again, chasing rotting units, pretty critical against Bretonnia, especially like archers and stuff, so they did a great job supporting there. Same thing with the Marauder Horsemen. So again, not trying to take anything away from Norman here, but this has generally been seen as a favorable engagement for Bretonnia, typically, just because Chaos has some of the best halberds in the game, always has. Best great weapons in the game, always has, right? And so, as a result, Bretonnia, because they're so predictable, it's just not great. And Foot Squires are so bad. Their attack and defense stats are just appalling. And I know Chaos Warriors are 150 points, again, kind of a premier unit, but just, I mean, look at the difference in stats here. Everything is much, much worse, right? And, you know, even something like, I'm trying to think of another kind of mid-tier great weapon that's a little bit lower in cost. I mean, I guess, what? Longbeards are 750, right? Again, way better armor, way better HP, better leadership, technically slightly slower, but yeah, much better melee attack, much better melee defense. 24 melee defense is really just absolutely appallingly bad. Yes, they have an anti-infantry bonus. Technically, that helps even out some of the melee attack difference, but it's really only 9 bonus versus infantry, which is not that much. You know, you even compare to like Empire Greatswords, which are already not a great unit in and of themselves. But the main difference being that Empire Greatswords have much better access to buffs, whereas Bretonnia really is lacking in any type of support abilities. So, I mean, their stats are not that much better. 6 better melee attack, 6 better melee defense. Technically, Foot Squires even have better weapon strength too, but the difference in HP is significant. The difference in armor is significant. Leadership, everything for the Foot Squires just worse. There have been patches in the past where Foot Squires were actually good, and you know, you'd often see a full 20 stack of like Fey plus infantry, and honestly, you know, I think it's time we nerf the Fey. It's been time to nerf the Fey for quite some time. I think there's one thing, this is kind of a little bit of a side discussion, I think, in general, I'm a fan of them changing all the passive drain effects in the game to be either activatable drain effects, like what the Arc of Sotek is, or else have it just be a different effect entirely. I do think for Mists of the Lady, you could make it like a minus bonus versus large AoE instead of a drain, and that would help Bretonnia not be so predictable. I mean, you'd still probably see the enchantress all the time because it'd be a strong ability, but then, you know, your cavalry doesn't have to just die to halberds in every single game, and you can still take cavalry into those matchups and have your opponent still, you know, predict you by taking halberds and not just die. Alternately, you know, make foot squires not suck. Also, Games Workshop, I know, teased a little bit of lore about Bretonnia for the Old World Revival, so I'm really hoping that they kind of do another lore pass for Bretonnia, maybe do an army book for the Old World Revival, and actually give Bretonnia some new units, maybe a new hero, just something. I have a few ideas. I'll probably end up making a separate video about that in the coming months, but yeah, just having any kind of additional support abilities and having the foot squires not suck would help a lot. And I quickly want to just end on some testing here. I know I've kind of gone a little long on this one after the fact, but just to kind of illustrate the point, this is some testing I did with Rider Rohan against White Lions, which are not as good. They're pretty close to Warriors of Chaos with great weapons, but they're not quite as good. So we're going to do this first test, and you'll see just how bad of an engagement it actually is. And again, keep in mind that while, yes, the White Lions are 100 points more expensive, they're also a generalist great weapon unit, right? Whereas the foot squires are supposed to be specifically anti-infantry. So, you know, you would think that given they are pretty close in cost, and one of them is supposed to be specifically anti-infantry, that those would actually win. And on the charge, it looks okay. Definitely looks alright, but it ends up being more or less a 50-50 trade, I believe. Yeah, if we look here, okay, so foot squires, no, sorry, not a 50-50 trade. They just lose. Foot squires just lose straight up. That's right. So, and I mean, you could argue that's about 100 points worth of value left on the White Lions, so maybe it's like exactly cost effective, but again, it seems to me like an anti-infantry specific should trade cost effectively into a sort of more generalist type great weapon unit, right? And so, you think about from a high level perspective, okay, and I know we were talking about Warriors of Chaos, but Warriors of Chaos, similar perspective. If your mid-tier great weapons can beat the best Bretonnian infantry in the game, you can just spam those mid-tier great weapons and they'll trade good into Bretonnian cavalry anyway, right? And this is sort of what I mean about being too predictable. And not even mid-tier great weapon infantry. You can take even mid-tier defensive spear infantry. And guess what? They're going to trade basically even against, and again, this is, while the Silver Guard aren't super heavily armored, they are 75 armor, right? So you would think, oh, foot squires are designed to counter this armored defensive infantry, right? We even brace a couple of them just to see, you know, with the bracing bonus if it ends up mattering. This is going to take quite some time. But it's going to go okay initially, at least for the ones that got their charge bonus. The ones that didn't get their charge, it's not looking good at all. For these other two, let's see if either of them are able to win. You know, Elven leadership is pretty good. Does look like, okay, so one foot squire managed to actually win, and the other ones all lose, pretty much. Well, these two are more or less going to butcher each other. Oh, no, actually, one of them did end up winning on the brace engagement. Okay, so maybe undermining my own point a little bit here. But again, this is a defensive spear infantry trading directly, you know, 50-50 evenly with a great sword infantry of a similar cost. You see where I'm kind of getting a little bit confused here? The anti-infantry just, you know, trading evenly with the anti-large infantry. So if foot squires, you know, if they didn't suck, it would be very helpful, because you would at least have something that could fight mid-tier halberds and great weapons, you know, without as much effort into micro or buffs or whatever else, but it's just not how it is currently. So, you know, hopefully that gets addressed at some point in the future. Again, if you'd like to see me make a video about my top 5 wishes for Bretonnia, as I have in the past for Beastmen and for Greenskins, which just, you know, not to toot my own horn, but most of those wishes did come true. Anyway, be sure to drop something, comment down below, like, share, all that jazz. Anyway, thanks again. See you next time.